Good morning. Hello, good morning, everyone. Okay. Silent my phone. Otherwise, it would be very distracting. Morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? I've been busy. Trying to do.
Stretch.
Oh, good morning, Ando. Hey, a good stretch every morning is good for yourself, for your backs, for your necks, and your arms. Don't forget to always pull back your arms and open up your chest because you're always hunchback when you are at the desk at work or at study. Always good to maintain a very good posture throughout the day, or put reminders. Hello, good morning, Noel. I see you there. Always maintain a good posture throughout the day. Otherwise, you'll get a bad back like me when you're old. Young ones today. Oh, Bit made it today. Hey, good morning, Bit. Aw, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, today, this is what I'm gonna do, right? I am going to try to read without stopping, as in, I'm gonna try reading without stopping, except for anyone who claims hydration, because I tend to forget to hydrate. So please do remind me to hydrate myself occasionally. Also remind me to stretch, and basically whenever I stretch, I kind of like reseat myself a little bit. So this is how it's gonna go today. I'm gonna try reading without stopping. By that, it means that anyone who comes through the door, I will not be greeting them. I will not stop and say, "Hey, good morning," and all that. So, yeah, I'm just gonna read. So if anyone walks in and they says hello to me, but I didn't greet them, Beat, can you do me a favor and explain to them that I will do a little talk. I will chit chat after the reading, basically. I will not be interrupting the reading at all because I found myself getting very distracted every time someone walks in, and I feel bad if I don't greet them. So if you be so kind, Bit, please help me welcome them and tell them what we are reading and where to listen. Thank you so much, Bit. Um, Twisty, my moderator, is not here today. My manager, my manager DN is also not here because she has taken a break from FF, which is good. It's good to take a break from FF. So anyway, I'm gonna start reading now. Oh, let me open the window actually. Be right back. 2 seconds. Okay. So, I'm gonna start reading in about 1 minute after hydration and lip balm. Just hold on for a moment. Today we are reading Minato Kanae's Confession, Chapter 2, The Martyr. Just a few months ago, I saw you every day, Yuko-sensei. But now, I don't know how to find you or where to send this letter. You stood there in front of us and told us that you couldn't trust the law to punish the boys who had taken the life of your little girl, that you were going to handle them yourself. And then you disappeared. That was pretty thoughtless, I think. If you are going to do that to them, then you should at least stay and face the consequences. You should be here to see what happens to them. I decided you need to know the rest of the story. What happened after you left us. So I tried writing you a long letter to tell you everything. Then I realized I didn't know where to mail it or what to do with it until I remember a new writer's prize they were advertising in that magazine you were always reading in the teacher's lounge. Kids in their teens win those things all the time. So I decided to send my letter in one of those contests. It's a long shot, but who knows? One thing worries me though. The magazine had been running a column by Sakura no Mi sensei for months now, and it ended in April. So, even if I win the contest and they print my letter, you may stop reading it. Like I said, a long shot. Anyway, I want you to understand that I'm not doing this because I want your help. It's just that there's something I've got to ask you. It's this. Can you feel it in the air? Do you sense it in the atmosphere? Whether it's stale or fresh, stagnant or fluid. I'm convinced that the auras of all the people in any place get together to create the mood. I guess I'm super sensitive to this kind of stuff because probably I never got comfortable in my own aura. Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe, and all I can think about is the feeling of the air around me. Anyways, if you had to pick a word to describe the air in our class after the new teacher came, you'd have to say it was bizarre. We have not seen Naoki since the day you left, when you told us what you had done to him and Shuya. But he was the only one absent in B class on the first day of the new school year. Everyone else was there, even Shuya. I guess that was actually more surprising that he was there. Nobody said anything to him. We just stood around whispering about him, and he didn't seem to care at all. He sat down at his desk and started reading some book, but there was a cover on it, so I couldn't tell what book it was. Not that he was acting tough or anything. That's what he has done every day since we started middle school. But that's what was so weird. Nothing seemed to have changed. It was nice out and the windows were wide open, but the air in the classroom seemed heavy and stale. Then, the first bell rang and our new homeroom teacher came in. He's young and kind of bouncy or something. And when he went right up to the blackboard and wrote his name, he went right up to the blackboard and wrote his name. They have been calling me Werther ever since I was in school, so that's what I want you to call me too. We still feel pretty weird about it, but that's what I'll call him here. But don't worry, he told us. The name's the same, but that doesn't mean I've got the sorrows part. Nobody's laughed. What? You haven't read it? He said, moaning and striking this dumb pose like he was in a play or something. Of course we got it. The characters for his name in Japanese means worthy. So some nerd figured out that was Werther in German and thought it would be cute to pretend he was the guy from the sorrows of the young Werther. We got it. Very funny. But didn't he get it? Couldn't he tell what was going on in the room? Didn't he feel the air? Oops, almost forgot. We need to call roll. So I know Naoki is absent. His mom's called to say that he has a cold, but is everybody else here? Another bad sign. He was already trying to buddy up to us, calling us by our first names. You never did that. You always treated us with respect. Then he started right in with his self-introduction. I wasn't much of a student in middle school myself, he said. I smoked, and if a teacher got on my bad side, I would let the air out of his tires or something. But my homeroom teacher of 8th grade straightened me out. He was the type of guy who would toss out his whole lesson plan when something bad happened to one of his students, when he felt like there was something serious that needed talking about. And I bet we missed at least 5 English classes just about my little crisis. He laughed at this point. But I doubt anyone was actually listening to him. They were probably all thinking, like I was, about Naoki's cold. We all knew he wasn't sick. Not in the way Werther thought anyway. But I guess I was a little relieved to hear that he was still planning to come to school, that he had not transferred somewhere else. A lot of kids were glancing around Shuya through all this, but I just sat there looking at the teacher like some honor student, though you could tell he wasn't really listening either. Werther didn't seem to notice one way or the other and just charged on. This is the first day of my first teaching job, so you, members of B class, are my first ever students. And since I'm new, I want you to be able to start fresh too. So, I have decided that I'm not even going to read the files of your first year homeroom teacher left on each of you. I want you to feel like this is a new beginning, and I want you to think of me as a big brother, as someone you can talk to about anything at all. They always extend homeroom the first day before the opening ceremony, and Werther had talked for what seemed like forever. But finally, he wound things up by taking out his brand new piece of yellow chalk and writing on the board in huge letters, "One for all for one." I don't really know what you thought of us, as individuals I mean. And I cannot imagine what you might have written about Naoki and Shuya in those files, but if Werther had bothered to read them, I bet none of this would happen. Naoki was absent day after day, and none of us had said a word to Shuya, but things were pretty calm going into the middle of May. It wasn't like we were all being mean to Shuya or hated him or anything. More like everyone had just decided that he didn't even exist. We all got really good at avoiding him, just like we got used to ignoring the stifling feeling in the classroom. One night they played this show on TV that was about a middle school, and they mentioned that some class had decided to use the homeroom period as reading time. They said that just those 10 minutes a day had improved students' attitude and helped with their ability to focus, and that the kids actually improved academically. As I was watching, I thought about Shuya. The next day, there was a new library in the back of the homeroom class. Werther had brought this little bookshelf and a whole bunch of books from home. I know they're a little dog-eared, but I want all of us to start reading every morning and getting absolutely everything we can out of life, Werther told us. Like everything he said, this sounded pretty dorky, but it didn't seem like a bad idea until we went to look at the titles of the books. I have to tell you that most of us has started to get used to Werther by this point, maybe even like him a little. He's pretty good looking after all. But after that, we could not take him seriously again. You see, one whole shelf of the case was filled with books by your friend, Sakura Nomi sensei, Manami's father. I guess Werther couldn't help noticing that we weren't impressed with his little library. Maybe that's why he took the book off the shelf when we were doing problems in his math class later in the day and started reading to us. Quote, I was never interested in religion, but as I wandered around the world, going from country to country, somehow I started carrying the Bible with me. There's a verse in Matthew 18 that talks about a man who has 100 sheep. Now, if one of those sheep is lost, the man will leave the 99 on the mountain and go looking for the one. And if he finds it, he'll take more pleasure in the sheep that was lost than in the rest that did not go astray. Now, to me, that's the definition of a true teacher. At that point, he closed the book. Let's forget about math for today and have a class meeting, he said, his voice getting really quiet, almost church-like or something. I wondered if we cannot put our heads together and think what to do about Naoki. I guess he suddenly realized that Naoki was a lost sheep. Anyway, he had us put away our math books without even checking the answers to the problems. Naoki had a cold for the first week of school, but after that, Werther had just said that he wasn't feeling well. I have to admit that I've been lying to you about the reasons Naoki has not been coming to school. He isn't playing hooky. He wants to be here, but somehow he lacks the will to come. It's a psychological block of some kind. I couldn't really see what the difference was between wanting to come and having the will to come, but that's the spin Werther put on it. Though it wasn't clear whether the explanation was his own idea or he was just repeating what Naoki's mother had said. I apologize for not being honest with you about this, Werther said, and I guess I felt a little sorry for him just then. Naoki had a psychological block alright, but Werther was the only one in the room who did not know how he got it. I don't think anyone in the class told anyone else about the things you said before you left. After school that day, we all got the same text. If you tell what A and B did, you are C. Though we never did figure out who sent it. All this was leading up to Werther's big idea. I want us to think about how we can create an environment that will make it easier for Naoki to come to school, he told us. Of course, nobody said anything to this. Even Kenta, who had been playing the straight man for a lot for Werther's stupid jokes, just sat staring down at his desk. But Werther chose not to notice or to assume that we were all thinking hard about what he had just said, and started in telling us his own ideas, as usual. I doubt he really cared what we were thinking anyway. Why don't we make copies of your class notes and deliver them to Naoki at home? This brought disgusted groans from various places around the room. Why not? Werther asked Ryoji, picking on him because his groan had been the loudest. Because, Ryoji muttered, not looking up, my house is on the other side of town from his. Not bad for an on-the-fly excuse. No worries, said Werther. How about we do this? You take notes in shifts, and then once a week, Mizuki and I will deliver them to Naoki's house. Why me? Because I'm class president again this year. Yusuke's vice president, by the way. And because I live in the same neighborhood as Naoki, I made sure not to let on how I felt about his plan, but I guess he could tell I wasn't thrilled right from the start. At one point, he asked me straight out why I was cold to him. I don't know for sure why he would say that, but it might be because I was the only one who refused to call him Werther to his face. Anyway, the next thing I knew, he was asking me whether I had a nickname. I told him I did not, that everyone called me Mizuki. But then, Ayako spoke up and practically shouted, Mizuho! And she was right. That was what everybody called me for the first few years of elementary school. Mizuho, they would say, stretching out the last syllable for emphasis. I like it, Werther said. It's settled. From now on, I'm going to call you Mizuho. What about the rest of you? Fate brought all of us together in this class. Let's really get to know each other. Break down all the walls between us. So after that, thanks to Werther, I went back to being Mizuho. We started taking notes to Naoki's house on the second Friday in May. I knew right where he lived, and I had actually been inside lots of times, since one of his older sisters had sort of taken care of me when I was 6 or 7. Naoki's mom came to meet us at the door. I had not seen her in a long time, but she looked just the same. Perfect makeup, beautiful clothes. When I had been there, playing with his sister, I remember how she would talk non-stop about Naoki, even when he wasn't in the room. How she was serving pancakes because they are his favorite. How he had found her crying from cutting onions one day and had handed her his little handkerchief. How he had taken third in the handwriting contest. I thought we would just give her the class note and leave, but we ended up going in and sitting down in the living room. Naoki's mom did not seem too thrilled about this, but Werther had apparently been planning on it from the beginning. I knew the living room too. I used to play Othello there with his sister. Naoki's room was right over where we played, and his mother would call us towards the ceiling and tell him to bring down a deck of cards. The sister who took care of me then is off at college in Tokyo now, and there was no way to tell whether Naoki was up there. His mother served us tea and sat down to talk to Werther. Your predecessor is responsible for Naoki's emotional difficulties, she said. If every teacher were as dedicated and enthusiastic as you clearly are, this would never have had happened. As I watched her, I knew Naoki had not told her what you had said and done to him the last day in class. If he had, she wouldn't have been so full of herself, and she couldn't have sat there bad-mouthing you. Since he had not told her, that meant he was suffering up there all by himself. Anyway, she went on complaining about you, Moriguchi this, Moriguchi that, without mentioning what happened to your daughter. I doubt she even knew that Naoki had been involved. Naoki never came down, and eventually I realized we were only there to listen to her griping. But Werther sat nodding with this stupid, sympathetic look on his face, as if this was the most wonderful thing he had ever heard. I'm not sure he was even listening to her. "Ma'am," he said when she finally paused, "I want you to leave Naoki's problems to me." There was a noise from upstairs just then, and I looked up the ceiling again. Naoki must have heard everything. Still, he didn't show up for school the next day, or the day after that. On the other hand, that seemed natural enough to us, as natural as the fact that we were all pretending Shuya wasn't there even though he was. It seemed to be the best solution at that time. They started handing milk again on the first Monday in June. The Health Ministry had published the results of the pilot program promoting dairy products to the nation's secondary students, Milk Time, and the prefecture had decided to follow up with the program of its own. As class officers, Yusuke and I had the job of handing out the cartons, but as we made our way around the room, we could feel the air getting heavier. Feel the bad memories coming back. Fortunately, no one had to drink the milk. The prefecture had made the case for the benefits, but plenty of parents had complained that their children did not like the milk or were allergic to it. I am amazed that there are so many moms and dads willing to spoil their kids like that. But that day, it meant that there were no names on the cartons and that we were free to drink or not. And when you look around, the only person in the room sucking on a straw was Werther himself. Hey, what's the matter? Don't you know milk's good for you?" He finished the last drop and crushed the carton. Yumi made the mistake of looking up and catching his eye. "I'm taking mine home," she murmured. "Great idea!" Werther laughed. "A pick-me-up for when you need it." He watched as we all put our milk into our bags. Shuya had classroom cleanup duty that afternoon. Just as he was turning around to get a broom out of the closet, there was a sound of something splattering. Yusuke had thrown his milk carton at him, and his aim was perfect. It had exploded all over Shuya's back. I was sitting at my desk working on the class log, and I didn't realize what had just happened at first. There were just a few kids still in the room, but every one of them was staring at Yusuke. I don't know how they really felt about Shuya, but even if they hated his guts, none of them would have had the courage to do something like that. Courage? I'm not sure that's the right word. I guess it felt like courage, coming from an athletic, outgoing kid like Yusuke. Shuya had not turned around when Yusuke spoke up. "You aren't even sorry, are you?" But that did not get a look out of Shuya either. He glanced down at the milk all over his pants, picked up his bag, and walked out of the room. We just watched him go in silence. That was the beginning of Shuya's punishment. "I think Yusuke must have liked you a lot. I realize now that you weren't the kind of teacher who make fuss over her students. You are more interested in finding the real value in each individual. You never made a big deal about it, but you always noticed when someone got the top score on a test, or did something great for her club, or got elected to school office. You would announce it before the homeroom or science class and make sure we gave them a round of applause. You had them clap for me more than once in homeroom. The class president is really just a classmate, someone who never gets noticed or thanked, but you made it a point of telling everyone I was doing a good job and asking them to show their appreciation. It was awkward, standing up there, but it still felt good. Werther, on the other hand, never does anything like that. He's always talking about only one or number one, some songs he's obsessed with. When they introduced the new teachers at the assembly on the first day, he even sang part of it when it was his turn to speak. I don't want to focus only on the best students, on the top athletes. I want to value each individual for the efforts he brings to everything he does. I want to be a teacher who can view each student fairly. At the beginning of May, our baseball team beat this private school that usually wins the whole league. They made it all the way to the semifinals. It was a first for the school, and the local paper even had an article with the pictures of the team. And to top it all off, the hero of the game, the ace of the pitching staff, was our own Yusuke. After the tournament, he was named to the All-Star team and interviewed for another article in the paper. Everybody was totally in awe, with the possible exception of Shuya. And for the first time since the start of the school year, the classroom didn't seem like a funeral home. But leave it to Werther to screw things up. Despite everything he had said about wanting to treat everybody the same, he didn't seem to care about anybody's but number one. He really made a big deal out of Yusuke and ignored everybody else. If you had been here, I know you would have praised Yusuke too, but I am sure you would have pointed out that he had not won the game alone. That baseball is a team sport, and no matter how good the pitcher is, he cannot play the game alone. You would have had us applaud the entire team. Why couldn't Werther have done that? I don't think they realized it at that time, but I bet Yusuke and every kid in the class you ever singled out felt there was something missing in the way Werther handled things. You could feel the frustration and anger in the room. You feel the kids needed a way to let it out. No one took it out on Shuya, at least not yet. I was going with Werther every Friday to visit Naoki's house. That first day, his mother sat us down in the living room so she could complain about you. But after that, when we kept coming back, she cut the visits shorter and shorter and kept us standing in the entrance hall. Finally, she stopped letting us in or even undoing the chain. She just took the envelope through the crack in the door. I could tell from the glimpse I got as we talked with her that she was still taking time with her makeup, but I thought her lips looked a little swollen. Naoki's older sister had married and moved to Tokyo. His father usually got home late from work, so much of the time it was just Naoki and his mother. And he was living with a terrible secret. I told Werther that I didn't think we'd get to see Naoki no matter how many times we went to visit, and that it actually seemed like we were stalking him or something. For 1 second, he got this nasty look on his face, and then he forced another smile. "No, Mizuho," he said. "We are just getting to the critical point for both of us. If we can hold on a little longer, I am sure they will understand what we are trying to do." It was clear he wasn't going to give up on the visits, but I wasn't sure who he meant by both of us, or the critical point. I wasn't even sure Werther had ever met Naoki, since he had not come to school once this year, but it seemed too late to be asking about that now. The next Monday, Werther showed up for math class with a piece of white cardboard and said he wanted us to write messages to Naoki to buck him up and get him to come back to school. I knew the classroom's aura was in for a change, but it wasn't exactly I expected. As they worked on the get well card for Naoki, some of the girls were giggling and a few boys even laughed. I had no idea why, but when it reached me, the board was nearly filled up with a line of odd phrases. "Don't worry. Imagine happiness. Everyone wins. Maybe you too? Unless you don't. Remember everything. Don't ever forget." Everyone knows. Really, we do. Everyone knows. Remember. Only now, as I'm writing this, can I see what they were doing. How could I have been so stupid? But they sure seem to be enjoying themselves as they work. So, the line of odd phrases have a few capital letters that reads, the capital letters are D, I, E, M, U, R, D, E, R, E, R. So, in this white cardboard that everyone wrote, the odd phrases spells out to die, murderer. Do you remember that you told us about the juvenile law that day? Even though it's meant to protect kids, I already had my doubts about it before hearing what you had to say. What about that case in H City where the boy killed a woman and her baby? I remember seeing her relatives talking about them on TV for days, about how senseless it was, how happy they had been in life, how brutal the boy who had killed them had been. I remember thinking then that you really didn't need a trial in a case like that. You could just hand the criminal over to the victim's family and let them do what they wanted with him. The people who are hurt most should have the right to judge the ones who hurt them. The way you did with Naoki and Shuya, you would only need a trial when no one was left behind. But it wasn't just that the evil boy who bothered me. I couldn't stand the lawyers, the way they stood up there and said everything they could to think of to defend the kid. Anybody could tell that they were lying. I'm sure there are reasons they have all those laws, and I know they have to stand up there arguing like that and looking important. But when you see them on TV, you can't help thinking you would like to have them right there in the room with you so you could give them what they had coming. Or maybe if you could just find out where they live and go throw a few rocks through their windows. At least that's how I feel. And that's in the case where I don't even know the victims or their family. Something I've only seen on TV. Something that happened far away. But if I feel that way, I'm sure a lot of other people do too. But as I've been writing this to you, I have changed my mind. I realize that you have to have a trial, no matter how terrible the crime is. Not for the criminal, but for the average people, to make sure they understand what has happened and to keep them from taking the law into their own hands. I suppose everybody wants to be recognized for what they have done. Everybody wants to be praised. But doing something good or remarkable isn't easy. It's much easier to condemn people who do the wrong thing than it is to do the right thing yourself. But even then, it takes a certain amount of courage to be the first one to come out and blame everyone else. What if no one else joins you? No one else stands up to condemn the wrongdoer. On the other hand, it's easy to join in condemning someone once someone else had gotten the ball rolling. You don't even have to put yourself out there. All you have to say is, "Me too." It doesn't end there. You also get the benefit of feeling that you're doing good by picking on someone evil. It can even be a kind of stress relief. Once you have done it though, you may find that you want that feeling again, that you need someone else to accuse just to get the rush back. You may have started with the real bad guys, But the second time around, you may have to look further down the food chain and be more and more creative in your charges and accusation. And at that point, you're pretty much conducting a witch hunt, just like in the Middle Ages. I think we, regular people, may have forgotten a basic truth. We don't really have the right to judge anyone else. After that day, when Yusuke hit Shuya in the back, there were almost always milk cartons shoved in Shuya's desk. The worst was when somebody kept one for a week a week or more, and the milk turned sour, or when there were too many they broke open. They put them in his shoe cubby and his locker too, but Shuya just cleared them all without a word, as though it was just a part of his morning routine. His notebooks and gym clothes disappeared a lot, and someone wrote murderer on every page of his textbooks. Most of us were still ignoring him, but a few mixed up kids harassed him non-stop. But one day, we all got the same text on our phone. You be the judge. Collect points for every blow you strike against Shuya the killer. It came from the same person who sent the text after you talked to us. The system was simple. Every time you did something to harass Shuya, you would send the detail to the original sender and he would award you with points. He would total up the score on Saturday, and the person with the fewest points would be labeled the friend of the killer. And he would get the same treatment as Shuya starting on the following Monday. You know, I didn't feel any sympathy for Shuya, but this just seemed totally dumb. So I decided right away that I was going to ignore the whole thing. And I was pretty sure a lot of other kids would do the same. But a few days later, I happened to spot two of the quietest girls in the class, Yukari and Satsuki. You know them. The idea of excitement is an art club meeting. Standing near the shoe cupboards, sending a text, and then I realized they were reporting that they had stuffed their milk cartons in Shuya's shoes. If those two were playing the game, I would be the only one who ended up with no points at all. So I was a little nervous when I headed to school on the following Monday. But the day passed without anything unusual happening. Apparently, some other kids had refused to join in, had decided not to score points off Shuya. Maybe the world wasn't going crazy after all. One day, towards the end of June, Wada cancelled math to hold a class meeting, even though exams were just a few days off. He told us he had something he wanted to talk about, and then he started waving this piece of paper at us. I found this in one of your homework notebooks, he said. We could hear the kids in the front row kind of gulp. But from where I was sitting, you couldn't see anything. There are bullies in this class, he said in this very dramatic voice, reading the words off the paper. I have to admit, I was pretty impressed by the courage it had taken to write this, and it meant that somebody else wanted things to change too. But I also realized that whoever wrote it had probably not thought it would be read out in front of the whole class like this. He or she was probably sweating it out about now. I'm not going to say whose notebook this was in, Wada continued, looking around the room, but I want us to discuss this problem as a class right now. I can tell, I've been feeling that something's not quite right. It's not right when a good student like Shuya is telling me for the third time this month that he has lost his notebook and has to get a new one. It's not just his notebooks, he has lost his gym clothes and his shoes too. So, I was just about to ask Shuya what was going on, but before I got the chance, some brave soul sent me this message asking for help. And I cannot tell you how happy that makes me. But I have to say that what's going on here cannot be called bullying. This sort of harassment isn't bullying. It's jealousy, plain and simple. The proof is that no one has dared to attack him directly. It's just been this constant messing with his things. Shuya is one of the best students in the whole grade, and I'm told he won an award in a national science competition last year. So it's pretty natural that some of you are jealous of him, and that you might even go as far as to harass him because of it. Which is why I have no intention of trying to find out who did this. It's your problem as a class. But I do have something to say to you. Whether you have been involved in this or not, it is clear that Shuya is a very bright student, and that doesn't mean that he's better than the rest of you in any way. Being a good student and getting good grades is what Shuya does well. It's his own gift. But each of you has his or her gifts as well. Rather than worrying about Shuya, I want you to find that gift and spend time developing it. I am sure some of you have no idea what it might be, and if that's the case, I urge you to come and see me. It's only been a few months since we've met, but I've been watching you carefully, and I think I've got some ideas. Just at that moment, the text tone went off, and Takahiro stuck his hand in his desk to kill the battery. Shit, he muttered. Having the phone wasn't a problem, but we are supposed to turn them off in class. Werther took the phone and went off with his speech. This is serious stuff I'm trying to talk about, he said. But one joker who cannot play by the rule can interrupt the whole thing. Turn them off! Any first grader knows that! The sermon went on for a while after that, and it seemed like getting interrupted by Takahiro was a bigger deal than bullying. So, if the writer of the note had really been looking for help from Werther, he must have been sighing under his breath by then. But the real nightmare hasn't even started yet. The witch trials were about to begin. It didn't take long. In fact, it was the same day after school. I haven't joined any clubs this year, but I did stay late to take my turn cleaning the classrooms. I was just about to get my shoes out of the cupboard at the front door when Maki stopped me. Nothing has changed with Maki since you left. She's still Ayako's sidekick and gopher. Ayako has something she wants to see you about, she said. Can you come back to the room? I was pretty sure that the something wasn't going to be pleasant, but if I refused, I would just have to deal with it later. So I followed her back to the class. As I walked through the door, Maki shoved me from behind and I went down on my knees. When I looked up, Ayako was standing there. Then I realized that there were 5 or 6 kids forming a circle around me. You blabbed to Werther, didn't you, Mizuho? Ayako said. She was completely wrong. But I thought that something like this might happen. No, I said, staring back at her. It wasn't me. Liar! She barked. It couldn't be anyone else. But you are so wrong. What do you mean by bullying? That's total crap. What we are doing here is punishing a killer. Don't you have sympathy for Moriguchi-sensei? Or are you that sweet on that murderer? There was no sense trying to reason with her. So I just shook my head, rejecting everything she had said. So you're not sweet on him? Well, prove it then, she said, holding out a milk carton. Hit him with this and we'll believe you. As I took the carton from Ayako, I suddenly noticed Shuya lying on the floor on the other side of the room, his arms and legs bound with tape. Ayako and the rest of them turned to look at him with these nasty grins on their faces. If I didn't throw the milk at him, I knew I would be getting the same treatment tomorrow, or worse. They would probably start doing all the stuff to me they were too scared to do to Shuya. Then our eyes met. I couldn't really tell what he was thinking, but I know Shuya's eyes weren't pleading with me or trying to make me mad. They just looked calm. As I stared into his eyes, I suddenly understood. He wasn't thinking about anything, wasn't feeling anything at all. He was the perfect image of a heartless killer. I know you said that Naoki was the one who actually killed Manami, but if Shuya had not been there, none of this would happen. Murderer! 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 Suddenly I had no more doubt. I got up, took a few steps towards him, then I aimed at his chest, shut my eyes and threw the carton as hard as I could. I could hear it bursting, and at that instant I felt this weird kind of ecstasy come up from somewhere deep inside me. I want to hurt this bastard. I want to make him pay. I want to make him taste his own medicine. Stuff that went through my mind like an electric current, round and round inside my head, until it finally stopped by the sound of the kids laughing. What was so funny? As I opened my eyes, I could see milk was dripping down Shuya's face, and a red spot was swelling on his cheek. I had missed his chest, but I had hit him right in the face. Nice, Mizuho! Ayako muttered, and they laughed even harder. But I couldn't understand what they found so funny. Not while Shuya was still staring at me with those eyes, and now I thought I knew what they were saying. Do you really have the right to judge me? He suddenly seemed to me like some sort of saint, persecuted by the mindless horde. I'm sorry, I blurted out, and I knew right away that Ayako had heard me. Wait a minute, she shouted. Did I just hear you apologize to the killer? Mizuho is no better than he is. Let's give her what she has coming. Ayako can get really dramatic, like she's channeling Joan of Arc or something, though I doubt she has ever heard of her. In a flash, they had my arms pinned behind my back, and I knew it was one of those boys in our class who grabbed me, but I was not sure who. It hurt. I was scared. I wanted somebody to help me. That's about all that was running through my head. From this day forward, Ayako still putting on the show, you and this boy are one! Then they pushed me to the floor, and I came to rest with my face just a few inches from Shuya's. Kiss! 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 They started to clap and chant. I wanted to yell at them to stop, but I was frozen with fear. The boy who was pinning my back took hold of the back of my head with his other hand and pressed forward until my face met Shuya's, and I heard a clicking sound. Look, Ayako, I got it! As Maki spoke, my arms were released, and I turned to find the whole group gathered around her to look at her phone. They were still laughing. Was that your first kiss, Mizuho? Ayako said, taking the phone from Maki and shoving it into my face. The picture on the screen showed Shuya and me with our lips pressed together. Now, what we do with this is up to you, Mizuho. Ayako said, taking the phone from Maki and shoving it in my face. The picture on the screen showed Shuya and me with our lips. Now, what we do with this is up to you, Mizuho, she said. Moriguchi-sensei, I know that Naoki and Shuya were murderers, but doesn't mean I can forgive kids who would do something like this. I don't remember how I got home after that. My clothes smelled like milk, so I got out of them and took a shower. Then I shut myself in my room and didn't come out for dinner. I had a vague feeling that someone was still holding my arms behind my back, and the sound of laughter rang in my ears. I couldn't stop shaking. I wanted the night to last forever, for a nuclear missile to come and annihilate everything. And I couldn't even sleep because the whole horrible scene came back to me the minute I closed my eyes. Around midnight, I heard a text coming to my phone. I was afraid they might be sending me the picture, but when I looked, it was a number I hardly recognized. Shuya's. He wanted to know whether I would meet him at a convenience store nearby. I thought about it for a minute, then decided to go. One moment, please. Shuya was standing next to his bicycle at the edge of the parking lot. I had no idea what to say or even how to look at him, so I stood facing him over the bike. Without a word, he reached into the pocket of his, fished out a piece of paper, unfolded it, and then held it up. The street lights were pretty bright, but I still couldn't see what it was. I had to strain my eyes, but finally I could tell it was some numbers. And with a little more effort, I saw that it was the result of a blood test, with his name written on top and a date from last week. It was in the mailbox when I got home, he said, folding the paper and putting back into his pocket. I knew, I said. He stared back at me with a surprised look on his face. Not the look of a child killer, but a look of full feeling, one I had not seen in a long time. There's something I've been wanting to tell you, I said. He went over to the vending machine and bought 2 cans of juice. Then he put them in the basket of the bicycle and told me to get on the back. Even an empty parking lot in the middle of the night was too public for what we had to talk about. I wonder what we looked like riding double on the bike through the dark town. Not that there was anyone to see. We passed almost no one or cars, but I was a little nervous, even though there was nothing between us. His mother was brother. His back. Oh my god, I'm distracted. His back was broader than I thought. I had assumed that he had been losing weight. As we rode through the dark, it seemed as though he had arrived to rescue me, just as the world was coming to an end. But if he had appeared out of the night to save me, then I had to tell him. After we had been riding for about 15 minutes, the buildings began to thin out and he pulled up in front of a 1-story house next to the river. It looked empty, and I was pretty sure he didn't live here. But he got off the bike, produced a key, and opened the door. He must have been able to tell that I was hesitating, because he turned around to explain that it had belonged to his grandmother and that his parents was using it to store stuff for their shop now that she was gone. Once we were inside, he turned on the light and I could see piles of boxes lining in the hallway. They must have blocked the breeze from getting in, because the air was heavy and humid, so we decided to sit down on the entrance step just inside the door.
Stretch!
Thank you. He gave me a can of grapefruit juice and I rolled it between my hands as I started to tell him what I had done that day. The day when you told us about Naoki and Shuya, there was just one part of the story that I couldn't really believe. Aw, thank you. Okay, I'll drink some coffee. The ending. It was the scariest part, of course, and it was you, Moriguchi-sensei, I was afraid of. After you left, Naoki ran out of the room and everybody else followed him. I was just about to leave too, when I noticed the box by the blackboard with all the empty milk cartons lined up in the slots with our names. My first thought, as the class president reflects, was to wonder who was on the cleanup duty. But then I realized no one would want to touch the cartons, which was when I found myself looking for Naoki's and Shuya's. You had been talking a lot about looking at things logically that day, So maybe that's why I found myself wondering about your logic. I could sort of understand the pain and sadness you must have been feeling, but I knew I couldn't really know how you felt. I've got people I love just like anybody else, but they are all alive. And even if I try imagining how I would feel if they died, it's still only imagining. But I was pretty sure that you would have some ability to be rational, no matter how much you hated Naoki and Shuya. That day, I found a plastic bag in the cleaning cupboard and wrapped up the 2 cartons to take home. I realized I couldn't leave the box with just Naoki's and Shuya's missing, so I took the rest of the cartons to the garbage bin behind the gym. I ran into a couple of teachers on the way, but they didn't say anything. Why would they suspect the class president when she was taking out the garbage? When I got home, I cut open the cartons and tested the milk in them with chemical that reacts with blood. Strange, I know, but I had some on hand. The result was just what I expected. Thanks for not telling anybody, Shuya said after I finished my story. I didn't know what to say. I had not kept this a secret for his sake. I just didn't have a really close friend I could tell. But he was right. If I had told anyone in our class, the attacks on him would have been even worse. But you believe everything else Moriguchi said? He asked. I nodded. And you're not afraid to be alone with me here? This time I shook my head. You don't mind talking to a child killer? I looked at him in the eye. If he was a child killer, then what were the other kids in the class? The ones who had treated him like an animal. I was more afraid of myself for having thrown the milk at him than I was of Shuya. His cheek was still a little swollen. I'm sorry, I said, reaching out to touch the red spot. Some part of me wanted to make myself feel what I had done. The warmth of his skin sent a jolt through my body. I don't think the shock was because I had been holding the cold can or because his cheek was hot from swelling. I realized I had been thinking he was a bloodless demon. But the moment I touched him, I knew he was just a boy like any other. Why did you show me the test result? This is what I had been wanting to ask him. Because I think we are a lot alike, he said. I put my finger on the pull tab on the can and looked at him, not knowing what to say. So he hadn't come out of the night to save me. Hold on, he said. Are you really going to drink all that? I looked at the can. I could drink the whole thing, but I thought I understood what he meant, and I realized I was glad. No, I don't think I can, I told him. Then I put down my can and he handed me his. It was still half full, and I took a few sips before I handed it back to him. He drank some and then handed it back to me. And when the can was empty, we kissed a while. I haven't told you, Sensei, that there's actually somebody else I like, but this was different. At that moment, I felt that Shuya was the only one in the world on my side. He took me back to the convenience store, and then as we were saying goodbye, he told me I had to come to school the next day. I really didn't want to go, but I was afraid if I didn't, I would end up locking myself in at home for the rest of my life. And now, with Shuya there, I felt as though I could stand the cruelty. I'll be there, I promised him. The moment I walked in the door, in the next morning, some of the boys started to whistle, and I heard giggling from the girls who were looking up at the blackboard. Someone had drawn a heart on the board and written my name and Shuya's in it. I kept my head down, the way Shuya always did, and went straight to my desk. But someone had drawn the same heart on the lid in permanent marker. Mizuho! Good morning! It was Ayako, waving his phone at me from his desk. But I ignored her and opened the book I had brought along. It was the same way when Shuya arrived. He got the same welcome. and he looked over at the blackboard too. He had the same blank look as always, and when he got to his desk, which also had the heart, he put down his bag and walked over to Takahiro, who was still whistling. "You've got something to say, kid killer?" Takahiro said, grinning at Shuya. Shuya didn't answer. He just gave him this look, and then he bit the tip of his little finger and ran it down Takahiro's cheek. It was like this symbolic line, a line of Shuya's blood, marking the end of punishment and the start of his counterattack. Some of the kids sitting nearby screamed, and then the room went completely quiet. "You were the one holding down Mizuki, weren't you?" Shuya murmured close to Takahiro's ear. "Were you sucking up to her?" he added, looking over at Ayako. Then he walked over to her and held up his hand. A trickle of blood ran from his finger to his wrist. Ayako had covered her face with her hand, but Shuya reached down and picked up her phone with his bloody palm. She screamed. "You act like a big shot," he said, "and get everybody else to do your dirty work, but you're too stupid to see someone playing you exactly the same way." When he said this, he went and stood in front of Yusuke, who had been watching from his desk in the back of the room as though none of this had anything to do with him. "And that would be you, asshole, the one who's pulling her strings. You've been getting her to come after me." And then he bent down and kissed Yusuke on the lips. Everybody in the room froze, and Yusuke looked like he was going to be sick. "Did you like that?" Shuya asked, and a big smile breaking out on his face. "You act all noble and talk about justice. But you knew Moriguchi's daughter was going to the pool. If you had told somebody, she'll probably still be alive. This is all because you're feeling guilty, isn't it? Did it make you feel better messing with me? They've got a name for people like you. They are called hypocrites. Consider this your first and last warning. If you keep this up, the next kiss will have a lot of tongue." After that, no one bothered Shuya anymore. In July, even after final exams had started, Shuya and I met at the house almost every day. I told my parents I was going to study with a friend, and since I've never given them any trouble, they didn't say anything even if I was a little late getting home. Shuya said his dad had remarried when he was in 5th grade, and they had a new baby at home, so he used his grandmother's house to study in. And they barely seemed to notice if he had come home for a whole week at a time. There was a room at the very back that Shuya calls his laboratory. He didn't seem to be studying for exams. Instead, he was working on some invention that looked a lot like a wristwatch. But when I asked him what it was, he refused to tell me. Still, I kind of liked sitting there watching him work on whatever it was. He finished it in the middle of July, and that was when he first told me it was a lie detector. He said there was a sensor in the strap that could detect variations in the wearer's pulse. When something changed, the dial would light up and an alarm would go off. "Try it," he told me. I put it on my wrist, but I was pretty scared. What if it shocked me? "Are you worried about getting shocked?" he asked, as though reading my mind. "No, not really," I said. Beep, 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 beep. The face of the lie detector flashed, and it rang like a cheap alarm clock. "It worked!" Shuya crowed. "Fantastic!" "Fantastic!" I repeated after him, actually feeling pretty impressed. This seemed to embarrass Shuya. He laughed, then he grabbed my wrist and pulled it towards him. "That's all I really wanted," he said. "Just somebody to notice me." I realized he was talking about what had happened with Manami. It was the first time he had said anything about it. I lay my free hand on top of the hand holding my wrist. You know how little kids trying to coax you along to get what they want? Shuya said. Well, maybe I should have done that to get their attention. Maybe I could have said, I found a dead cat in the field. Really? Well, actually I'm the one who killed it. No. But it's true. Sometimes I kill cats and dogs. No, you really do? But I don't just kill them. What do you mean? I use execution machine I invented. You're kidding. That's fantastic. Open it. There's a surprise inside, Mizuki. Do you think I'm a murderer, Mizuki? What am I supposed to do now? Shuya was crying. And I had no idea what to tell him. So I just held him in my arms. I'm not sure why, but the alarm on the lie detector went off again. It was nearly dawn when I got home the next day. Wada was really happy when he realized that bullying had stopped. Shuya was smiling again in class, and he got the top scores of the entire grade in the final exams. Everybody assumed that Yusuke would be elected class representative, but then some kids started saying how they might even vote for Shuya. Wada seemed elated. I even saw him winking at Shuya once in the hallway as he was being complimented by one of the English teachers. It made me want to puke. But Wada still had a big problem. Naoki. If he didn't start coming to school again soon, he wouldn't be able to graduate and go on to high school and college. I'm not really sure how you feel about this, but I've been thinking about what it takes to admit you cannot do something when you really cannot do it. I know you don't like kids to give up when they haven't even tried. I know that's wrong. But I think you also have to be really brave to admit that you cannot do something when you really just can't. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I wish Wada had been brave enough to admit that he could not get Naoki to come to school. Or maybe, if he had just talked to one of the other teachers about it, maybe they could have suggested that he go to some other school or something. Because the reason he couldn't come to the school was here, in this class. After school on the day before first quarter ended, Wada and I went to pay our usual visits to Naoki's house. It was about 6 o'clock. But the sun was still high in the sky and I was really sweaty as we stood outside together at the door. I had brought along a letter I had written to Naoki that day, because I didn't think it was fair to tell Shuya the results of the test on the milk carton and not tell Naoki. Of course, I didn't think I could just tell him that what I knew and get him to come back to school. I didn't really care whether he came or not. I just wanted to give him one less thing, a really big thing to worry about. Naoki's mother had barely opened the door when Wada handed her the class note in an envelope and the card we had all signed, which he had wrapped up like a present. I was amazed he hadn't brought the card before this. I wish he had forgotten about it altogether. When her arm came out of the crack in the door, I could see that she was wearing a heavy long-sleeve shirt. Maybe she had the aircon on, but it still seemed a little weird for such a hot day. I didn't really get a good look at her face, but I did try to hand her my letter before she shut the door. But just then, Wada wedged his foot in the crack and started to yell, "Naoki! If you are there, listen to me! You're not the only one who had a hard time in this term. Some of your classmates have been bullying Shuya. It's been pretty bad. But I managed to convince them that they are wrong. It wasn't easy, but I did. They got it. So how about it, Naoki? I know you're hurting, but I think I can help. Why don't you give it a try? I think we can face your problem together. And I know I can help you solve them. I want you to trust me. I want you to come to the school tomorrow. Come to our closing ceremony. I'll be waiting for you." as I stood there listening to him. I got really, really mad. He had been so wrong about everything. He had said that they weren't bullying Shuya, that they were really just jealous of him. But now it stopped. He calls it bullying. When I looked up at Naoki's window, I thought I saw the curtains move a little. Werther was so worked up by this point that he looked pretty crazy. His eyes were all buggy and out of focus as he bowed to Naoki's mother and shut the door. You could see some of the neighbors looking at us from their windows, but Werther just smiled at them and turned to me. "Mizuho," he said, "I want to thank you for coming with me all this time." He was talking to me, but his voice was a lot louder than it needed to be, loud enough for everybody on the street to hear him. It was almost like he had been putting on a show from the start. I had been his audience from the first act right through the final curtain. I had been brought along as the witness so I could testify to the fact that he had made all these house calls, that he had been a totally devoted teacher. I felt the letter I had brought still in the pocket of my skirt, and I crumpled it into a ball. That night, Naoki killed his mother. They cut short the closing ceremony for the first quarter, and the PTA ran a special meeting for us that afternoon. Last night, one of your classmates was involved in a serious incident. We still don't know all the details, but we want you all to know that you are not in any danger. That was all the principal told us, but everyone knew anyway. We had been talking about it in class, and we knew Naoki had done some terrible things, but we wanted to know more. There was a strange excitement in the room. We went back to the homeroom after the closing ceremony, but Werther said nothing about it. I could tell he wanted to talk to us, but the school must have put on some kind of gag order. Then, the homeroom ended, and everybody was sent home, except me. I was told to stay after. I wasn't surprised, since I had been at his house just a few hours before it happened. Before he left, Shuya gave me a good luck charm. I waited for a few minutes, and then Werther came back into the room. "You have nothing to worry about, Mizuho," he said, putting his hands on my shoulders, looking at me in the eye. "No matter what they ask, just tell the truth." I looked back at him, holding really still. "Can I ask you something?" I said at last. He nodded. "But before I do, would you put this on?" He looked skeptical, but I told him that it was a good luck charm, that all the kids were wearing them. Then, I handed him the lie detector watch that Shuya had slipped me before he left, and watched as he strapped it on. "So, were you going to Naoki's house every week because you were really concerned about him, or were you just going because it made you feel good about yourself?" "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous, Mizuho! You were there! You knew it perfectly well. I was doing it for Naoki!" Beep, 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 beep. Werther looked down at the flashing face of the watch as the awful sound filled the room. "What is this thing?" he snarled. "Don't worry," I told him. "It's just the last judgment." I followed Werther to the school office. The principal was waiting for us, along with the lead teacher for our grade and the 2 police officers. Werther and I sat side by side, and they asked us to tell them everything we could about Naoki, even though they still had not told us anything more than what had happened. I just told them my story, as Werther suggested. "I've been going every Friday with Yoshiteru sensei to deliver copies of our class notes to Naoki's house. His mother always comes out to meet us, but we haven't seen Naoki once in all the time we have been going. At first, she seemed pretty happy to see us, but lately I've been getting the feeling that we are bothering her. Even when it's hot, she's always wearing long sleeves, and sometimes I can tell that she has bruises on her face under her makeup. I thought she might be getting them from Naoki, maybe because she tried to get him to school every time we showed up at her house. She never said anything, but I could tell that our visits themselves were beginning to stress Naoki. He isn't the kind of kid to get angry or hurt anybody, but I suppose he felt backed into a corner when he heard us coming, and he had nowhere else to let off steam. His mother had spoiled him pretty bad, and I guess he tried to hurt her when she couldn't figure out what else to do. I suppose you would say that he's a little weak, but I think all his other teachers realized that. The only one who didn't realize that was Yoshiteru sensei, who was convinced he could solve Naoki's problems all by himself. But the more we went, the more Naoki felt trapped and the more he lashed out at his mother. That's why I told Yoshiteru sensei I thought we should take a break from the visits, but he didn't care what I thought. Instead, he made everything worse the other day when he started yelling up at Naoki's window so loud that everybody in the neighborhood could hear. It was like he wanted to turn Naoki into a freak or something. I think Naoki thought of his house as some kind of sanctuary since he couldn't face school, but Yoshiteru sensei wanted to smoke him out of that one safe space. It was almost like Yoshiteru sensei was hunting him. But he isn't ever thinking about what's best for us anyway. We're just a mirror he uses to stare at his own reflection. None of this would have happened if he wasn't so self-absorbed. I know it's hard to believe, but all of this has happened in one term. In 4 months since you left us. It's summer vacation now, and I'm wondering whether Werther will be coming back for the start of the new term. If he's shameless enough to show up, then I've got some things to figure out. Since last summer, I've been collecting all kinds of chemicals. If things get too awful, I'm planning to use them as my way out. But I've started to think that I should test them on someone else first to see if they work. What I really want is some potassium cyanide, and now might be the best time to get it since the teachers are all much more worried about the scandal and their reputations than about the keys to their storage lockers. I bet if I asked Tadao sensei for his, he would give it to me, no questions asked. It should be easy to slip something into Werther if he comes back in fall. He's the only one who drinks the milk, and I guess I wouldn't care anyway if somebody else got some. But I suppose you may be wondering why I hate Werther so much. It's because I've been in love with Naoki ever since the 1st grade. He's my first and only love. I guess it started when that idiot Ayako began calling me Mizuho. She was jealous because she's so dumb and I always knew all the answers. So she made up some stupid nickname and the others joined in. After that, I was Mizuho to everybody except Naoki, who kept on calling me Mizuki. I'm not even sure why he refused to go along with Ayako. Maybe he was just used to Mizuki. But it was enough to convince me that he was my only friend in the world. One of Naoki's sisters told me that when she asked him why he had killed their mother, she said it was because he wanted the police to arrest him. Moriguchi sensei, do you mind if I ask you one last question? What do you think of your revenge now? That is the end of chapter 2. Let me flip through chapter 3 and see how long it is, so that I can see if I can fit fit it in about 45 minutes. Otherwise, we will end today early and we will continue tomorrow. Oh, the next chapter is a bit long, unfortunately. What? Wait, hang on. Can't be true. Thank you! Just give me a moment. I'm trying to check how long is chapter 3. Chapter 3 seems really, really long. 1 second. I think I can do chapter 3. Yep, let's continue. Okay, I'll drink my coffee. I'll drink my tea. Thank you so much for the redemption. I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Okay, let's continue. We are now continuing Minato Kanae's Confessions, Chapter 3, The Benevolent One. It was early morning on July 20th, a few days before I was due to go home for summer vacation during my second year of college, when I suddenly had a call from my father. He had 2 pieces of news. One, that my mother had been murdered, and 2, that the murderer was my little brother, Naoki. That made things a little complicated. If your mother is murdered as a relative to the victim, you should hate the murderer. But if the murderer is your brother, then you have to face the criticism that goes along with being a relative of a criminal, while worrying about the chances for your brother's rehabilitation and apologizing to the victims, of which you happen to be one. How do you do all this at once? One thing's for sure. The press and the hangers-ons aren't going to leave you alone just because you are a private family matter. It's a private family matter. In no time at all, our house was surrounded, and the looks in people's eyes weren't sympathetic or even particularly mean, just blatantly curious. Murders aren't as rare in Japan as they used to be. In fact, they're so common that most people just yawn when they hear about one on the TV news. But they can still stir up interest when they offer a look inside the workings of a dysfunctional family. Like you see how badly things can go wrong. Dysfunctional love, dysfunctional discipline, dysfunctional education, dysfunctional human relations. At first, everybody wonders how something like that could happen to such a nice family, but when you poke around a bit, the dysfunction comes out, and then you see that it was bound to happen, that it was only a matter of time. I imagine there are people who see this kind of thing on the TV and worry about their own family, but I never really did. It always seemed like it could never happen to us. The Shitamuras were normal, the most average family you could imagine. But it did happen. We had our murder right in the family. So, what made us dysfunctional? The last time I was home was at New Year's. On January 1st, my mother and I My mother and father and Naoki and I went to the neighborhood shrine for the ceremonial first visit of the new year. Then we came home and sat around, eating the traditional food mother had made while we watched TV. I told my mother about friends I had made in tennis club while we worked in the kitchen. And Naoki talked about this comedian who had come to perform at the school festival. The next day, our older sister came to visit with her new husband. We all went to the mall to check out the New Year's sale. Naoki's grade had gone up a lot during the second term, so mom and dad bought him the laptop he had been wanting. And I managed to guilt trip them into getting me a purse. It was the same as every other New Year. An average celebration for an average family. I've been over everything we did and said 100 times I cannot think of anything that might have been a clue to what was coming. What could have happened in 6 months since that made everything go so wrong? My mother's body had a single stab wound to the belly and a contusion on the back of the head. They said that she was stabbed with a kitchen knife and then thrown down the stairs. They say it all seemed so unreal even after I saw her in the morgue. I couldn't really believe she was dead or that Naoki was the one who had done that to her. Why did this happen? If I can't figure that out, I won't be able to accept my mother's death. If I can't figure it out, I won't be able to accept my brother's guilt. If I can't figure it out, my father and sister and I won't be able to go on as a family. I began to learn about my family's dysfunction 2 days after my mother's death, and it was the police who first started to explain. It seemed that Naoki had never been to school after the start of 8th grade. Actually, it's not that rare now for kids to refuse to go to school or even leave the house, but the truly disturbing thing about Naoki's behavior is that my mother was the only one who knew about it. It might be understandable that I didn't know what was going on since I was living far away, or even my sister didn't know. She's pregnant and lives in another town. But it's incredible. My father knew nothing when he was right there with them in the same house. I understand he had a long commute and worked late most nights, but how could you miss the fact that your son wasn't going to school for 4 whole months? When the police asked him about it, he said he supposed it had something to do with an incident that had occurred during the 3rd term of the previous year. My father is usually pretty quiet, but after all this he seemed like a different person. During the police interview, he rattled on and on in answers to their question. I won't repeat everything he said, but here's a quick summary. The daughter of Naoki's homeroom teacher fell into the school pool and drowned. Naoki happened to be there when it happened and he wasn't able to save her. The teacher felt that Naoki was somehow responsible for her daughter's death. That made Naoki terribly. That upsets Naoki terribly. And though the teacher resigned, Naoki unable to bring himself to go to school after that. Now, I have no doubt that a child as emotionally fragile as Naoki would have trouble coping with something like this. I believe he might have shut himself away from the world as a result, but I am not sure how I see how this would end with the murder of my mother. Once he had stopped going to school or leaving the house, what did he do all day at home? How did he interact with my mother? Now that she's gone, he's the only one who knows, but I'm not allowed to see him yet. So how was I supposed to find out? But then I remembered what my mother had said when she bought me a diary when I was first setting off to live alone in Tokyo. Whenever you are worried or sad about something, I want you to know that you can talk to me. But when you can't or don't want to, you should try writing in here. Just imagine you're talking to the person you trust the most in the whole world. It's amazing how much human brain is able to remember, how much you hold on to life. But when you write something down, you can forget it. You no longer have to hold it inside. Remember the good things. write the bad one downs in there and forget about them. Apparently, her favorite teacher in the middle school had given her a diary and told her pretty much the same thing as a way of comforting a student who had lost both her parents right after the other. So I searched the house and found my mother's diary. March 13. Yuko Moriguchi, Naoki's homeroom teacher, came to visit yesterday. I disliked the woman the first time I met her. I even wrote to the principal to say that I disapprove of having a single mother in charge of a class of impressionable adolescents, for all the good it did me. A mother's opinion doesn't count for much at a public school, but I was right about her. And the proof came in January this year when Naoki got into a fight with some high school boys and the police took him into protective custody. The homeroom teacher is responsible in that kind of situation. She should have gone down to the station to help him, but this Moriguchi was too busy with her own child and sent another teacher instead. If the principal had moved Naoki to a different homeroom at that point, none of this would have happened. There was an article in the local paper about how Moriguchi's daughter had drowned in the school's swimming pool. I'm sorry, of course, that she lost her little girl, but I have to say, I found it odd that she was bringing her to school in the first place. I doubt that would have been tolerated had she been working anywhere else but a school. You might even say that it was the loose regulations for the school employees and her spoiled attitude that caused her daughter's death. But as if that weren't enough, she suddenly showed up here and started Naoki all sort of questions and making all kinds of insinuations. First, she asked him about how he had been getting along at school. Even though she must have known most of it, Naoki told her again. How he had joined the tennis club but had to quit because he couldn't stand the coach. How he started going to cram school after that, and how he had got mixed up with those high school boys at the video game center and had been punished by the school even though he was the victim. You could tell from the way he told all this that he had been excited and happy to start middle school, but things had turned out badly. None of this was his fault, but he was still miserable. As I listened to him, I got madder and madder at Moriguchi. Why was she here? Just to stir up all these bad memories for Naoki? But still wasn't enough for her. She started asking him what he knew about her daughter's death. Finally, I couldn't help myself. Why are you asking all this? I practically screamed at her. This has nothing to do with Naoki. But before I was done, Naoki had said something that nearly made me faint. It wasn't my fault, he murmured. Naoki had become friendly with a classmate named Shuya Watanabe at the beginning of the third term. I had read about him in the paper when he won a prize for the theft prevention purse that he had invented. And at the time, I was happy that Naoki was making the right kind of friends, but this Shuya turned out to be a horrible boy. He decided that he wanted to try out his invention on someone, see how they reacted to the electric shock he had rigged up in the zipper, and that he had forced Naoki to pick the victim. Naoki's too kind-hearted to have named any of their classmates, so he suggested one or two of the teachers. But the Watanabe boy wasn't interested in any of them. So Naoki finally mentioned Moriguchi's daughter. I am sure Naoki thought it was a safe suggestion, that Shuya would never do anything like that to a little girl. But we weren't dealing with a normal boy. This Watanabe is a real bad seed. He jumped at Naoki's suggestion and immediately started working out on a plan. Finally, that afternoon, he dragged Naoki along and waited for the girl at the pool. It almost made me faint when I imagined what it must have been like for Naoki. Apparently, he was the one who spoke to the girl when he came to feed the dog. Watanabe was counting on Naoki's wonderful way with people to lure her in. Once the little girl had begun to trust them, Watanabe gave her the little pouch in the shape of a rabbit character. He put the cord around her neck and told her to open it. To tell the truth, I had seen the pouch myself. Naoki and I had come upon them at the mall, just as the little girl was begging Moriguchi for it. I suppose she thought she was teaching her daughter a lesson, but if she had just bought the thing for the child that day, she could have avoided the scene at the store and deprived Watanabe his spade. Heaven knows, she could afford it on her salary, even as a single mother. The girl touched the zipper and collapsed, and Naoki was forced to witness her death. I can't imagine how frightened he must have been. But I think it must have been even more frightening to realize that Watanabe had been intending to kill her all along. As soon as it was over, he told Naoki that he was free to tell anyone if he wanted to, and then he turned around and left. But did Naoki run and tell on him? No, he was too loyal a friend. He decided to cover for Watanabe by trying to make it look like an accident. So he threw the girl's body into the pool. He told Moriguchi that he was so upset that he didn't remember much more after that. Well, she said in that condescending tone of hers, since the police have ruled it out as an accident, I don't intend to stir up trouble. Stir up trouble? For whom? It was all Watanabe's fault. He planned the whole thing. Naoki was nothing but his unwitting accomplice, as much a victim as anybody. She may have decided not to tell anyone, but I was so mad I was almost ready to go to the police myself and tell them the whole story. But Naoki did drop the body in the pool. Would that make him an accessory of some sort? He had been trying to cover up somebody else's crime, which might be a crime too. Naoki has so much to look forward to. I couldn't let him get mixed up in something like this and not get charged as an accomplice to murder. So much as I hated to, I had to pretend to be grateful to Moriguchi, but I was staring daggers at her as she left that day, just under my relieved little smile. I had no intention of telling my husband anything about this, but that afternoon I began to think it might be a good idea to offer Moriguchi some kind of compensation. So a solation payment of sort. I wanted the whole thing over and done with, and I didn't want her coming back with her hand out later on. But if it was going to involve a substantial sum of money, that meant I would have to get my husband involved. So when he got home from work, I told him the gist of what had happened and had him call Moriguchi. But as it turned out, she refused the money, which leaves me wondering why she came here in the first place. My husband said we should report the whole thing to the police. Is he out of his mind? I told him Naoki would be charged as an accomplice, but he said it would still be the right thing to do even for Naoki. I suppose that's the best you can expect from a man, a father, in this kind of situation. But at this point, I was feeling sorry I had ever told him anything. As usual, it's up to me to protect Naoki. From the beginning, I have had trouble believing that what Naoki said about all this. It seems more likely that poor Naoki just happened to be there, and that horrid Watanabe forced him to go along to say what he had been in it from the start. Or maybe it was Moriguchi. Maybe she had made the whole thing up. Maybe her daughter really did slip and fall into the pool, and she's the real criminal for bringing her to the school in the first place. But because she didn't want to face the truth, she latched on to Naoki and Watanabe, who just happened to be there, and forced them to tell this lie. I bet that's closer to the truth. How could he be involved? I would have Sorry. Sorry. How could he be involved? I would have realized something was wrong, and I know he would have told me the truth without Moriguchi having forced it out of him. That's gotta be it. The whole thing was made up by that pathetic woman, which means that Watanabe is a victim too. It's all Moriguchi's fault. March 22nd. Today is the last day of the school year. I could tell Naoki's been depressed since that visit from Moriguchi, but he has been going to school every day, so I've been trying not to worry. When he got home today, he went right into his room. He didn't come down for dinner, and he went straight to bed without saying good night. I suppose he has been exhausted from the tension, and it all came out at once. He's got some time to rest now during the vacation. But it makes me sad to think that Moriguchi will still be there when he goes back to the new school year in April. March 27th. From the first day of break, I noticed that Naoki has been acting a little odd.
Stretch.
This is very intense. Reading a diary of a crazy fucking woman. March 27th. From the first day of the break, I noticed that Naoki has been acting a little odd. Almost as if he had suddenly become a neat freak or developed obsessive compulsive disorder. The first sign was when he asked me to serve dinner on individual plates rather than in one big bowl for all of us. And that from a boy who had always been happy to eat leftovers off my plate or anyone else's. Then, it seemed like there was a new announcement every day. He wanted his laundry done in a separate load. He didn't want anyone getting in the bath after he had used it. I've seen things like this on TV, and I decided that it was just a phase, something to do with puberty, so I have done as he asked. I'm not sure what's the best course, but it's clear for now that he really doesn't want me touching anything he wears or uses. He has never had to do housework of any kind, but now suddenly he's washing all his own dishes and doing his laundry. Only his own, of course. As I'm writing this, I realize it must sound as though he suddenly become a model child, but when I actually see him doing all this cleaning, I can't help feeling terribly worried. He spends a whole hour scrubbing just a few plates and cups. Then he puts the whites and the colors into the washing machine together and adds way too much bleach and runs the wash cycle over and over again. He acts as though all the germs out there in the environment had suddenly become visible to him. Yet, if that were the extent of it, I suppose I could just accept it as an extreme case of OCD and try to figure out what to do about it. But Naoki's trouble is worse. At the same time, he's cleaning everything around him. He's doing just the opposite to himself. He's getting filthy. He refuses to do anything to clean his body. I keep telling him he's gotta take care of himself, but he stopped combing his hair or brush his teeth. He used to love taking a bath, but now he won't go anywhere near it. He was walking down the hallway today and I jokingly gave him a tiny little shove in the direction of the bathroom door, but he turned around and screamed, "Don't touch me!" in a tone of voice I've never heard from him before. It's really the first time he has ever raised his voice to me at all. I tried telling myself that he's going through a rebellious phase, but it made me terribly sad all the time. But a few minutes later, he came to find me like nothing had happened, and started talking about things he remembered from years ago. It was so strange. I don't know how much longer I can take this. March 31st. One of the neighbors came over today with some bean cakes that I brought back from a trip to Kyoto. Naoki has never been fond of sweet beans, so I decided to take some up to his room anyway to see if he might be interested. I wasn't surprised when he refused, but then he showed up in the kitchen a little while later and said that he has changed his mind and wanted to try them. I made a pot of tea and we sat down. I have to admit I was nervous. He took a little nibble and then shoved the whole cake in his mouth and swallowed it in one bite. Then, for some reason, he started to cry. "I never knew they were so delicious," he said. "I never knew." It was when I saw him crying that I realized all his cleaning and his self-neglect have nothing to do with puberty or rebellious phase or OCD or anything else. It's all because of what happened with the Moriguchi girl. "Eat as many as you want," I told him. He took another cake out of the box and unwrapped it, and this time he ate it slowly, one bite at a time. And I'm pretty sure he was thinking about the little girl the whole time he was chewing that cake, mourning a child who would never enjoy a delicious treat like that again. He is truly a sweet boy. I suspect it's not just when he's eating the cakes either. I think he thinks about her all the time, no matter what he's doing. All that compulsive washing must have been his way of trying to wipe away the terrible memory. And at the same time, he neglects himself and lives in filth because he feels guilty about being comfortable when she's unable to feel anything at all. He's still punishing himself for what happened. At last, I feel as though I understand why he has been acting so strangely these past few days, and I'm sorry that I didn't realize sooner what he has been going through. He has been asking for my help all along, but I was too blind to see. This makes me realize all the more that the real villain here is that awful Moriguchi with her false accusations and evil mind games. If she has to find a way to escape her own guilt, couldn't she at least pick on someone as warped as she is? It's too awful for words trying to pass on her sins to a sweet boy like Naoki. It's obvious she quit her job because she couldn't escape her own feelings. She would have had to face the same class of children at the start of next year, so the only solution was to leave. I have half a mind to write to principal and ask him to find an enthusiastic young man to take her place. Naoki needs to stop worrying. What he needs now is to forget the whole thing. And the best way to forget the painful things in life is to write them down in a diary like this. Come to think of it, it was what my favorite teacher in middle school who taught me that. Why was I so lucky having such a wonderful teacher while Naoki ends up with a loser like Moriguchi? That's what she is, alright. A loser. She was just a little unlucky. But his luck is about to turn, I'm sure of it. April 3rd. I went to the stationery store today and bought a diary with a lock and key. The lock makes it feel as though you are really closing away all the stuff you spill out on the pages. I took it up to him a few minutes ago and told him I knew he has all kinds of troubles bottled up inside. But you don't have to keep it all in there, I told him. And you don't even have to tell me. Just write it down in here. He is an adolescent boy, so I was worried he might think a diary was too girly. But he took it without saying anything. Then he started to cry again. "Thanks, Mom. I'm not much good at writing, but I'll give it a try." By then, I was crying too, but I'm feeling better. Try not to worry. I am sure he'll be back on his feet soon enough. I am sure I can help him forget about all this unpleasantness. I am sure. April 8th. I usually write down bad things I'm trying to forget here in my diary, but today I feel as though I have to write about something that makes me happy. Mariko came by to tell me that she's pregnant. She's only in her third month and she's not showing yet, but you could tell by the look on her face. Confident and happy and ready to be a mother. She brought along Naoki's favorite cream puffs and we were going to have a little celebration, just the three of us. But when I went up to his room to get him, he refused to come down. He said he thought he was catching a cold and didn't want to pass it on to his sister. Mariko seemed a little disappointed, but she said that Naoki was a lot more considerate than her husband, and then started complaining about the way he had been smoking around her even though he knew it wasn't good for a woman in her condition. She grumbled on and on, but I wasn't really listening, really. I was realizing that I had been misreading Naoki. I had been so focused on his strange behavior that I had lost sight of Naoki himself. He wasn't just my sweet boy. He had grown and matured to the point that he could show real consideration for his sister. It made me truly happy to realize that. It made me even happier when he leaned out the window as she was leaving and waved to her. "Congratulations, Mariko!" he called. "Thanks, Naoki!" Mariko called, waving back as she started down the street. As I watched the two of them, all the doubts I had been having about my skills as a mother has vanished. My children had all turned out all right. I was raised in the most wonderful family. My father was strict. My mother was the model wife. They had my brother and me, the perfect family. All our relatives and neighbors made a point of saying how much they admired and envied the four of us. My father let my mother run the household while he worked like a dog day and night to provide for us. And thanks to his efforts, we were a little better off than most of the other families around us. My mother was strict with me, looking after my training and making sure I had the kind of upbringing, manners, etiquette, and all the little details that would let me hold my head high no matter where I went or whom I married. My brother, on the other hand, was spoiled and coddled and praised. He was taught to be confident and to do things exactly his opinions and preferences dictated. My mother was determined to provide a home life that would let my father focus all his energies on work, so she took it up on herself to solve any problems that arose. But I suppose it was because we were so fortunate that those tragedies came to us one after another. While I was in middle school, my father died in an automobile accident and my mother fell ill and followed him soon after. My brother was 8 years younger than I am, so he was just a boy when we were taken in by relatives. And because of the difference in our age, I began to act like a surrogate mother to him. From that point on, following my mother's example, I was strict with myself, but treated my brother with great care and indulgence. I would like to think that that's why he was able to get into a top university and work in a prestigious company, build a fine home for himself, and flourish in life. That may explain why I feel nothing can go wrong if I follow my mother's example. Naoki continued to show symptoms of OCD combined with self-neglect. I can't think of any better way to describe his condition, but after I gave him the diary, he seemed to be in a good mood a bit more often. I have also begun to realize now that I think back that my two older daughters had phases like this too. Mariko was in middle school when she suddenly announced that she wanted to quit piano lessons, and Kiyomi was about the same age when she started to refuse to wear the clothes I bought for her. Naoki had the bad luck to be caught up in that nasty mess right right at this sensitive moment in his development, and I think he's still trying to figure out what to do next, what his life will become. I have to keep this in mind and try to stay calm. If I continue to praise every little thing he does and show him unconditional love, just as my mother and I did for my brother, then I'm sure I'll get my sweet Naoki back. Or rather, I'm sure I'll get my Naoki back, but even more grown up. He just needs rest and recuperate while he's still on spring break. April 14th. April 14th. A couple of years ago, you started hearing a lot about young people who were dropping out of society, the ones you called hikikomori, shut-ins, or NEETs. They say there are more and more of them every year, and it's getting to be a major social problem. But when I hear those words, I wonder whether the real problem isn't the names themselves, but the whole idea of giving titles to children who stop going to school or looking for work. I believe we find our sense of stability in our life, our sense of stability, our place in life, by participating in society, by coming to belong somewhere and taking on title of that position. Mother, teacher, doctor. Not belonging anywhere, not having a title of some sort means in effect that you are not really a member of the society. So it seems to me that most normal people, if they found themselves in that situation without a position or title, they would feel terrible anxiety and do everything they could to secure a place in the world as quickly as they could. But at that moment, you start calling those young people by those names, hikikomori, NEET, or whatever. Those names become their titles, their sense of belonging. They can feel right at home, quite comfortable and reassured, knowing that they are full-fledged dropouts with their own recognized condition and function in society. Why then would they see any need to make the effort to go to school or find a job? Once society accepts these names and positions, there's very little we can do about it. But I still cannot understand parents who are comfortable calling their own child a hikikomori or a NEET. How can they hold their heads up in public? There's only one explanation. They are determined to blame the child's condition on the school, or on society, or on everything except the situation in their own home. But they are fooling themselves. The school or society may have something to do with the problem, but the child's personality first and foremost is molded in the home, and you have got to assume the root cause is there too on some level. A child becomes a hikikomori because of something in his life. If that's the case, then Naoki is definitely not a hikikomori. The new term started exactly a week ago, but he still hasn't been to school. The first day, he said he felt a little feverish, so I let him stay home and didn't make an issue out of it. When I called the school, a young man answered and told me he was a new homeroom teacher. It was gratifying to know that the principal had finally seen things my way, and I went straight to Naoki's room to let him know. A young man like that is bound to be more sympathetic, I told him. But he was feverish the next day, and the day after that, and had no interest in going to school. When I tried to feel his forehead, he brushed my hand away and practically snarled at me, and when I gave him the thermometer, he made up another excuse. It's not a fever exactly, more like a headache. I'm sure he's not really ill, but he's just not playing hooky either. The prospect of going to school brings up the whole incident for him again. I think that's what's keeping him at home. Naoki is weary at heart. He needs rest, which is why I'm going to take him to the doctor and get a medical excuse. If he just stays at home without a diagnosis, the neighbors will start calling him a hikikomori. He may not like the idea, but we need to see the doctor just this once. I'll have to put my foot down about this. Today, I took Naoki to see a psychologist in the next town. I knew he would put up a fight, but I didn't want to be one of those parents who loses control of her own child, the type who settles for calling him a hikikomori. If you won't go with me to see the doctor, I told him, then I want you to go to school right now. But if you'll go and get them write you a proper excuse, I'll stop insisting you have to go to school. I know you may not realize it, but psychological problems are considered real illnesses nowadays. Just go and talk to them and we'll see. He thought about it for a minute. They want me to draw my blood? He asked. He has been afraid of shots since he was a little boy, and it made me love him all the more to realize that's what he was most worried about. He's still just a child. Don't worry. I'll tell them not to give you any shots, I said, and with that, he started to get ready to go. It was then it occurred to me that he had not been out of the house since the last day of the previous term. They gave him a quick physical at the clinic and then he received nearly an hour of counseling. No matter what they asked him, however, he just looked at his lap and said nothing. He seemed unable to explain how he was feeling, either physically or psychologically, so I had to step in and tell the doctor what has been happening. I told him that Naoki has been falsely accused of a crime by the last year's homeroom teacher, and that he no longer felt comfortable going to school. I also mentioned his problems with the compulsive cleanliness and the rest of it. The doctor told us that Naoki is suffering from autonomic ataxia. He said I shouldn't try to force him to go to school, and that the most important thing right now is to avoid causing him stress and to help him to relax. I was given strict orders to keep him at home. On the way back, I asked Naoki if he wanted anything to eat. He said he wouldn't mind a hamburger and mentioned a fast food chain that he likes. I don't care for those places myself, but I suppose at his age, he craves for that sort of food from time to time. We went to a restaurant across the station. I wrapped a paper napkin around the burger so I wouldn't have to touch it. And as I was eating, I realized that Naoki had chosen a fast food restaurant because of his new hygiene concern. In a place like this, you don't have to use plates and utensils that other people have used before you. No one else is going to use your dishes after you finish with them. A little girl about 4 years old and her mother were sitting at the next table. I found myself disapproving of the woman for bringing such a young child to a place like this, but then I saw the little girl was drinking milk, and I felt a little reassured. Or I did, until she dropped the carton and it splattered on the floor. Milk got on the leg of Naoki's pants and his shoes, and he turned white as a ghost and went running for the bathroom. I think he lost his whole lunch. He was terribly pale when he came back. He was certainly mentally unstable, but I am also concerned he is not physically well either. I'm going to send the doctor's excuse to the school tomorrow and let him rest at home for the time being. May 4th. Naoki spends a good deal of his time cleaning now. His fingernails had grown embarrassingly long, but he endlessly scrubbed every dishes. He is forever washing and drying his clothes, though they are always wrinkled and mussed. And every time he uses the bathroom, he scours the toilet, the walls, and even the doorknobs. I tell him I can do all this, but he pays no attention. And if I try to help, he screams at me for touching his dishes or clothes. Of course, there's nothing wrong about what he's doing, and I know I should probably just leave him alone. But then again, I'm sure all this has to do with what happened at school, and I feel as though I've got to do something. I know he should be taking a bath at least once a week, but since he's not going outside, he's not sweating or getting dirty, so it hasn't become too unpleasant. Tea time is my favorite moment of the day, and if Naoki is in a good mood, I bring out a treat, a trick I learned after the neighbors brought those sweet beans. We sit eating together. Sometimes he'll even tell me he's hungry for my special pancakes. He no longer comes along with me when I go shopping, but at least I can enjoy picking out something he likes when I'm in the store. I'm not really sure what he's doing for the rest of the time, working on his computer, playing video games, sleeping, but he's always up in his room and he makes very little noises. Perhaps he's just taking a little break from life. May 23rd. Naoki's new homeroom teacher, Yoshiteru Terada, was kind enough to pay us a visit today. I had spoken with him on the phone several times, but meeting him in person, I was extremely impressed with his energy and dedication. Naoki said he did not want to come out of his room, but Terada-sensei listened carefully to what I had to tell him. He also brought along copies of the notes from all of Naoki's classes. I was particularly grateful to him for this since I've been worried about Naoki's studies. He may need time to rest at home, but I don't want him to fall behind on school. This Terada seems like an extremely caring and concerned teacher. The one thing that bothered me though, however, was the fact that he brought Mizuki Kitahara along with him. He may have been thinking that having a classmate here would help Naoki relax, but I wished he had chosen someone who didn't live right here in the neighborhood. I've been in touch with the school about Naoki's condition, but I don't know what Terada-sensei has told his class. If Mizuki goes home and tells his parents about that, If Mizuki goes home and tells her parents that Naoki has become a hikikomori, and they tell their friends, and then the whole town will know in time. But I will call the school tomorrow to thank Terada, and I may also ask whether he could get the class to write something to Naoki to perk his spirits. I went up afterwards to give Naoki the notes they had brought, but when I opened the door to his room, he threw a dictionary at me and yelled something horrible about being a foolish old hag babbling to everybody. I thought my heart was going to stop. I've never seen him act like that or use such awful language. I'm not even sure why he was so upset. Later on, I made him a hamburger, his favorite, but he didn't come down for dinner. I think Terada-sensei might be able to help Naoki, and that gives me the courage to go on. June 12th. Naoki's obsessive behavior continues, but he may have grown tired of washing dishes. He asked me today to start serving his meals on paper plates. He also wants to drink out of paper cups and use disposable chopsticks. It sounds terribly wasteful, but if that's what it takes him to calm down, I'll go and get everything tomorrow. He hasn't taken a bath in more than 3 weeks, and he wears the same clothes and underwear day after day. His hair is greasy and his body started to give off a sour smell. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I brought a damp towel to wipe his face even though I knew he would be upset. But he shoved me away and I fell and hit my head on the banister. He no longer comes down for his afternoon snack, but he's still cleaning the toilet. He seemed to be coming down for a while, but now he's terribly agitated. How did he get like this? I'm afraid it's these visits from his teacher and Mizuki. They come every Friday, and I began to notice that Naoki stays locked in his room for longer and longer periods around their visits. He knows I've said that he can stay at home for the time being, but I suspect they're causing him to wonder whether he can trust me on this, whether I am secretly trying to get him back to school. As for Terada-sensei, his energy and enthusiasm has filled me with hope, but as time goes by, he comes back again and again. I've realized he isn't accomplishing anything. He brings the notes, but he seems to have no idea what to do beyond that. No plan or strategy at all. He must be discussing Miss Naoki's problem with the principal and the head teacher for the grade. But it's a mystery what they are thinking. I've thought of calling the school to ask for help, but I'm afraid if Naoki got the wind of it, he might stop coming out of his room altogether. So for the time being, I'm going to have nothing to do with the school. July 3rd. We live in the same house, but it has been days since I last saw Naoki. He no longer comes out from his room at all. When I take food up to his room on paper plates, he asks me to leave it outside his door and waits until I'm gone to get it. He hasn't had a bath in over a month. There's no signs that he ever changes his clothes. He does come out to use the bathroom, of course, but he seems to pick times when I'm out or busy with something. When I come home, I often found the toilet freshly scrubbed, but a sour smell lingering in the air. Not a bathroom smell, but more like stench of rotting food. Naoki seems to see himself as a warrior of some sort. His armor is the filthiness of his body, and his room is his besieged castle. I had thought he would get over this if I just watched and waited, but he seems to be cutting himself off more and more each day. I suppose I'm going to have to confront his fears and anxieties myself. Dressed in his armor of filth, Naoki lies sound asleep in his frighteningly neat room. If all goes well, he'll stay that way until sometime this evening. I'm not proud of having slipped a sleeping pill in his lunch, but I couldn't think of any other way to get him cleaned up. Get this filthy armor off him. I'm convinced that his filth itself, a product of his feelings of guilt, is what keeps him locked away from the world. The curtains were closed and his room was dark, so I had to get close to the bed despite the smell to see his face. His skin had been beautiful, but there were some sore-looking pimples coming up in the grease and grimes, and his hair was covered in crusty dandruff. Yet, I still couldn't resist the urge and rubbed my face gently along his cheek. Then, I brought the scissors in my other hand close to the shaggy hair above his ears. The scissors, the same one I had used when I was sewing a little bag for his school supplies in the first grade, made a loud clack as I took the first snip of oily hair. And I was worried I would wake him up, but somehow I managed to give him a haircut of sorts. I hadn't been intending to give him a haircut at all. I just wanted to make it look so bad that he would want to go to the barber. I just wanted to put a chink in his armor, so to speak. The clippings fell all over the bed, but it occurred to me that they might make him itchy and convince him to take a bath. So I did what I could and left him there sleeping. A cry, like the howl of a beast, came from upstairs just as I was starting to make dinner. It was so inhumane that it took me a moment to realize it was Naoki. When I did, I ran up to the stairs and gingerly opened the door to his room, only to have his laptop flying out at me. The room, which had been neat for a few hours earlier, was now a complete shambles, and the creature that had been my son was making blood-curdling sound and throwing everything he could reach against the wall. "Naoki, stop!" I screamed, so loudly I surprised myself. And he did. He froze and turned slowly to look at me. "Get out," he said, his voice completely flat. I realized that he had gone mad, and I suppose I should have taken my life in my hands simply embraced him, held on no matter what he did. But for the first time in my life, I was terrified of my own child. and I found I couldn't stand to be in the same room with him, so I ran from there as fast as I could. I realized I couldn't handle this alone any longer and decided to talk to my husband, tell him what's been going on. But then I got a text message on my phone, which I almost never used, telling me that he had to work late and might not be coming home at all. There's nothing I can do but write all this down here in my diary. Naoki's room is right above me and it's quiet again, so perhaps he has fallen back asleep. July 12th. I must have nodded off in the living room when I was writing, but sometime before dawn, I woke to the sound of shower coming from the bathroom. I thought my husband must have come home, but I found Naoki's clothes in the dressing room instead. He decided... Thank you, Ando. He decided all on his own to take a bath. It's hard to imagine after seeing the way he was last night, but perhaps sleep has calmed him down and he had reconsidered. So my strategy of opening a chink in his armor had worked. The shower ran for more than an hour. I found myself worrying that he might be contemplating something radical, suicide even. So I kept going to the bathroom door to listen. But each time I could hear the sound of the stool on the towel or the scrubbing of a washcloth, so I went back to the living room to wait. It was his first bath in nearly 2 months, so of course it was going to take time. I'm afraid I let out an audible gasp when he finally did come out of the room. He had completely shaved his head. It was shocking. I realized it was the most hygienic solution. With his head shaved like that, he looked like a monk who had shed all his worries. His fingernails had also been trimmed. He had changed into some new clothes that I bought him. But to be honest, the Naoki standing before me wasn't a very reassuring sight. His face was completely expressionless, as though, along with the dirt, he had washed away every trace of human feeling. I didn't know what to say to him, but he spoke up first. "I'm sorry about all this," he said, his voice as flat as his expression. "I'm going to the store for a minute." Not only that he had taken a bath, he was ready to leave the house. I blurted out that I would go with him, but he said he wanted to go alone. Of course, my first instinct was to follow him, but I worried he might spot me, and that might undo everything I had worked for since last night, so I forced myself to sit down and wait for him to come back. As I watched him head down the street, I realized for the first time the seasons had changed. Spring is long over, and summer is here. July 17. What I'm going to write about here, Naoki's trip to the store, happened just a half hour or so after the events in my last entry, but several days have passed, and I've been too upset to get to my diary. After he left, it occurred to me he had wanted breakfast when he got back. So I went into the kitchen and started making some scrambled egg with bacon, one of his favorites. Then, my cell phone started ringing. As I said before, it almost never does. I had a bad feeling about the call, and I was right. It was the manager of the convenience store down the street, calling to say that he was holding Naoki and I should come right away. I had been worried he might do something reckless, shoplifting for example, so I had given him plenty of money before he left, but I knew he was still upset and thought he might have taken something on impulse. But it was nothing as simple as shoplifting. According to the manager, Naoki had come into the store and wandered around the aisle for a while. The manager had seen him putting his hand in his pocket and assumed that he might be stealing. But then, He took his hand out of his pocket and walked back through the store, rubbing his palm on the drinks and food on all the shelves. It was an odd behavior, to be sure, but not in itself causing to detain his child, except that Naoki had been smearing the storewares with blood dripping from his hand. His right hand was wrapped in a bandage, which the manager said Naoki had taken from the shelf and applied by himself after they had stopped him. They found a razor blade stolen from our bathroom in his pocket. The manager said nothing like this had happened before. He wasn't sure what to do, so he decided to call the first number in the contacts list of Naoki's phone, mine. Naoki refused to say anything to the manager or anyone in the store, but since no actual crime has been committed, they decided not to call the police. And I was able to make the whole thing go away by buying everything in the store that he had touched. He was quiet on the way home too. Since I had been making breakfast, I went back into the kitchen. Naoki followed and sat down at the table. Perhaps he didn't want to go back into his room now that it was in a shambles. I was carrying bags filled with all the bloody things I had bought, setting them down on the table. I sat across from him. Then I asked him why he had done such a terrible thing. I didn't really expect an answer, but I couldn't help myself from asking. But he did have an answer. I wanted to get arrested, he said, his voice totally empty of emotion. Arrested? Why? What do you mean? Are you still thinking about what happened to Moriguchi-sensei's daughter? You didn't do anything wrong. You've got to stop worrying about this. He didn't answer, but I realized this was the first time we had actually even mentioned the whole thing. I wanted to be positive and cheerful as possible, realizing that this might be the one chance to turn the corner and get back on track. I'm starving, I said. And you know what? I never had a convenience store rice ball. I might as well try once, since I've got so many. I took a rice ball out of one of the bags. The label identified the flavor as tuna and mayonnaise, but the wrapper was now covered in brown streaks of Naoki's blood. You probably shouldn't eat that. You might catch AIDS. So saying, Naoki took it from me, peeled off the wrapping, and began to eat it himself. I had no idea why he had done that, or why he had mentioned AIDS and had told him so. Moriguchi-sensei gave me milk infected with AIDS virus. Somehow his tone and expression remained absolutely neutral even as he was telling me this horrible news. As the words ran around my head, I could feel goosebumps all over my body. That can't be true, I said. But it is. She told us what she had done the last day of school. That crusading teacher, Sakuranomi Sensei, was actually her daughter's father. You remember him. You said you like his books. They said he was dying of cancer, but actually it was AIDS. And it was his blood that Moriguchi Sensei put in our milk. Shuya's and mine. Throughout this gruesome confession, his expression been flat and empty, but as he finished, a look that seemed almost cheerful crept over his face. Unable to sit still any longer, I hopped up, went to the sink, and vomited again and again. Moriguchi had to be nothing less than a monster to have infected my dear sweet Naoki with HIV, the AIDS virus, and he had to bear this awful secret all by himself without telling anyone, not even me. His obsessive behavior, his self-neglect, his tears when he ate those sweet beans, it all made sense now. I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude that he was still alive. I want you to go to the hospital with me, I told him. I'll explain everything to them. I wanted them to do something immediately, perhaps even drain all Naoki's blood and replace it. I was getting more and more worked up. But Naoki was utterly calm, perhaps because he wasn't finished. The next words out of his mouth were an even worse nightmare and sent me to even lower depths of hell I had already fallen into. I don't think I can summarize, so I'll write it down just as it was. I don't need a hospital, he said. We should go to the police. The police? Of course! We need to have them arrest Moriguchi. Not her. I want them to arrest me. What do you mean? Why should they arrest you? Because I am a murderer, he said. Don't be ridiculous. You didn't kill anybody. I'm not even sure I believe what you said about dropping the body in the pool. But even if you did, that's not murder. Moriguchi-sensei said that she was only unconscious, that she died because I dropped her in the water. That's absurd! But even if she did, you didn't know, so it's still an accident. No, he said. You're wrong. A smile spread over his face. She opened her eyes when I was standing there holding her. And then I dropped her in and let her drown. I can't write anything more today. July 19th. That idiot Terada was just here again. He behaved even more terribly than usual. He stood outside our door and yelled about Naoki staying home from school in a voice so loud the whole neighborhood must have heard. And he even had the nerve to bring along a big card that Naoki's classmate had made for him, with a perfectly ghastly message picked out in bright red marker. Don't worry, imagine happiness. Everyone wins, maybe you too. Unless you don't, remember everything. Don't ever forget, everyone knows. Really we do, everyone knows. Remember, they must have thought they had created a marvelous code, one that Terada was apparently too stupid to figure out, but I saw it almost immediately. The first letter spelled out die, murderer. Naoki is a murderer. A murderer who has to put up with this terrible abuse from stupid children who has nothing better to do than to amuse themselves. But they did help me make up my mind. Before this, I had decided that Naoki had dropped Moriguchi's daughter in the pool after Watanabe killed her and nothing more. I had been convinced that Moriguchi had made up even that part. The truth was considerably more horrible. He had dropped her in the pool after she had regained consciousness. In other words, the murder had been intentional. When Moriguchi came and questioned Naoki until he confessed, I had been so convinced he was lying that it was Moriguchi herself who had forced the lie out of him. That's why I was so sure he was innocent. But now, I see that he was lying even then, quite intentionally. I didn't want to hear the terrible truth. He had finally told me, but I no longer thought he was lying. I am Naoki's mother, and a mother can tell when her own son is lying. But I'm sure it was because you were frightened. You threw her into the pool after she opened her eyes because you were afraid. I repeat this over and over to Naoki. I knew how foolish I sound, like a mother blinded by love for her child. But once I had been forced to admit that Naoki had committed murder, I was looking for one last shred of hope that he had done this horrible thing because he was terrified. But he refuse me even this. If that's what you want to believe, he said. He had no intention, even now, of telling me why he had killed that little girl. Yet he seemed relieved, as though he had done just that and had gotten everything off his chest. And when I asked him again and again whether he has been afraid, he just said we should go to tell the police, as though he was humoring a crazy woman. When he washed away the filth he was using as a shield, I think he must have also washed away the sweetness he had since he was a baby. He is no longer the Naoki I love. He has lost all trace of human kindness and become a murderer, and a defiant son. And there is just one thing a mother must do in that case. Yoshihiko, I am grateful to you for all these years we have spent together. Mariko, I am sorry I never got the chance to see your baby. Take good care of my grandchild. Kiyomi, stay strong and follow your dreams. I am going to join my dear mother and father and take Naoki with me. End of diary entries. I thought if I was willing to root around the darkness, I might discover the truth, and that might help me find a tiny crack of light, the beginning of a way out. But now that I have finished reading my mother's diary, I don't see anything I like, that I can even see my own way forward. My mother had tried to kill my brother before she took her own life. But when I first heard he had become a hikikomori, that's what I had assumed. My mother had been so obsessed with her ideal family life. That had been her one source of happiness, so much so that killing Naoki to avoid having to face the destruction of that ideal might have made sense to her. But the truth wasn't quite so simple. She had actually been willing to let Naoki stay home, having convinced herself that he needed some kind of time out from life. She was a woman who couldn't sit still, always fussing over this or that. So it must have taken a great deal of willpower just to watch and wait while my brother sat in his room. I don't think it was the sleeping pill and the haircut that sent my brother over the edge. I think he was already at the breaking point, and it was just a matter of time before he had to confess what he had done. Still, things might have ended differently. If they had been able to hold out just a few more weeks, I would have come home from school. Now that I've read the diary, I'm not sure what I would have done. Now, how I could have helped Naoki. But at least there would have been two of us in the house. We might figure something out. Two in the house. I still wonder how my father could have missed the whole thing, or whether he actually knew what was going on and just pretended that he didn't. I know mother would have been furious with me for thinking this, but I suspect father was pretending to be mildly depressed as a way to avoid dealing with Naoki's trouble. Or maybe he really was depressed because of Naoki's troubles. But then, Naoki's troubles, his fundamental weakness, was probably something he got from father in the first place. I suppose our real family could never have lived up to the ideal, and it was always only an ideal that my mother had in her head. But looking back on it right now, I realized that we really were a normal, happy family until all this happened. The shock caused my sister to have a miscarriage, and she was still hospitalized. The reporters and the photographers have been poking around, even following her to the clinic, and I suppose it's just a matter of time before they connect the dots and figure out that Naoki was involved in the incident at school. Probably not much longer now. They have tried to question Naoki, but he says nothing. I'll probably have to give mother's diary to the authorities. And when they realize that she was intending to kill Naoki, and that he had already been treated by a psychologist, he'll probably be found innocent. Which is what we all want. For mother's sake, for Mariko's and mine, and even for father's. I want them to find Naoki innocent. But that can only happen once they find out what he was really thinking. And that is the end of chapter 3, The Benevolent One. Thank you for listening to me today. I'm very grateful for y'all to be here. I see some. Oh, chicken
Stretch.
nugget! Oh my god, I haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for the stretch redemption. Oh my god. Thank you for dropping by. Anoria Stormborn, nice to meet you. I think this is your first time here. Thank you for being here with me. I hope you all enjoyed the crazy Mother's Diary as much as I did. That was really great. I can totally understand why they made the movie the way it did. Not to spoil anything, but yeah. Yeah, by the way, for those who do not know, it's a long read or long... I'm sorry, Ando. I should have stopped at chapter 2, but I thought maybe I could like push on for a little bit more. You guys don't have to stay if it's way too long for y'all, you know. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Anoria. It's nice to meet you today. Yeah. To those who don't know, it's a novel that was made into a movie, and it's a very, 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 very well done movie. If you have not watched the movie yet, I would suggest. I mean, if you have not watched the movie yet and still like to follow my reading, I would suggest not to watch the movie because spoilers. But thank you so much. But if you guys don't mind spoilers, go ahead and watch the movie. It's an amazing film. Oh, thank you, Boulder. Hey, asked you. I assume you are Anoria Stormborn in game or something. I have to go Rattlers way. Thank you, Maggie, for making it here today and bringing your friend Rumiel. Thank you. This is the both of you. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoy the reading today. Chicken Nugget, is this your first time here? I don't remember. I know you're around, but I don't know if you ever came to Nudibles. Oh, Bit, I love you. Thank you so much, guys. Oh, thank you. And Zalont, thank you as always. Always picking the right spot to sit, huh? Very comfortable carpet, right? Seriously, if I go to a venue like this, a carpet is definitely where I would sit as well. It's okay. Yeah, go enjoy yourself in Eorzea. Hey. So what do you guys think about the story so far, huh? To those who are still in chat. Aww. It's okay. I have the VOD up. I have the VOD up in Twitch and also my YouTube channel. I recommend watching it from the YouTube channel because the loading is easier there. Sometimes the buffering in the Twitch channel is kind of annoying. Yeah, see ya later, Bit. I haven't been playing the game a lot. I've been just AFKing a lot lately because I've been busy. But yeah, I'll try to like catch up with you on like gameplay or something. Why are you leveling right now, Bit? I'm leveling my samurai right now. That's my last that's my last melee. That's my last DPS class that I'm leveling. Yeah, definitely. I agree, Twisty. The book is so fucking good. This is going to be like one of my all-time favorite book now. Yeah? You should pick up reading seriously. It's a very, I would say, like, if you're a very restless person like I am, reading is like a form of meditation. Oh, you're living in a dark night? We can go on roulettes together. Yeah. I mean, yeah, just read. I mean, not yeah. I mean, just reading itself is a meditation method because you are like you're so concentrated in the story that you're not thinking about anything else. So you are basically meditating. Yeah. It's really good. This book is really good. Like I thought the movie was great. I think the book is insane. Like I'm so happy that I bought the book right after I watched the movie. Yeah, I'm hungry as fuck right now. I need to eat. I need to work also. I need to eat and work. God damn, son. Yeah, no worries, Bit. Okay, I'm gonna give 5 minutes for anyone who wants not 5 minutes. For the next 2 minutes, anyone wants to claim a poem or a love quote or a tarot reading, please do so before I end the stream. I usually end the stream with a poem. Oh, thank you so much, Zelant. I stutter a lot because my pronunciation is shit at times, and when I get into character, I tend to read like when I get into the character who is like I'm trying to get their feeling out, so I tend to stutter a little bit and like stumble onto like words a lot. So I realize that whenever that happens, you guys ask me to drink water, but it's really not about drinking water. It's just me trying to rush out the words because I'm in character. Yeah, and I try to read it as how the person is feeling. I think, yeah. Alrighty, less than 2 minutes to go. I'm gonna choose a poem. I think I'll go Carol on the building. Oh wait, let me see. Let's get some good old Emily Dickinson poem. You don't have to, like, if you're busy, you don't have to. There's always I always have VODs up. Don't worry about it. I always put up the VOD as soon as my stream ends, because otherwise I will forget and I'll procrastinate, basically. But yeah. Thank you guys for being here with me today. Thank you. You guys can come in here anytime you want to, like, I don't know. Don't I mean, to RP is fine, but don't ERP in here, please. So just come in here to chill, AFK, G pose. It's fine. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm totally okay with that. If you haven't been to my basement, the basement is pretty awesome as well. If you guys want a place to, like, I don't know, hold a conference or a meeting, let me know. I'll open up the place for you guys. I mean it's open anyway. You guys can visit anytime you all want. Oh yeah, do if if it's not too much to ask for, do leave me a nice review on the message book at the entrance. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna end my stream now, and I'm gonna end it with this poem by Emily Dickinson. Poem number 128, circa 1862. Written in 1862. I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. I held my spirit to the glass to prove it possible. I turned my being round and round and paused at every pound to ask the owner's name for doubt that I should know the sound. I judged my features, jarred my hair. I pushed my dimples by and waited. If they twinkled back, conviction might of me. I told myself, take courage, friend. That was a former time, but we might learn to like the heaven as well as our old home. And that is the end of today's stream. I shall see you guys soon, and where's my favorite emote? I forgot to put up my favorite emote. Hang on, give me 1 second. I'm gonna send you all off with my favorite channel point redemption. Give me a second. Okay, there you go. Alright, have a good day. Have a great Thursday. Look forward to Friday. I may or may not read tomorrow. I'll confirm with you guys later. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for being here with me today, for the reading, for listening, and being here with me in spirit and in person. Thank you, and have a great day.
Have you ever had a dream that